ما شاء الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله. Okay, الحمد لله. Allahu Akbar. You're on page 129. And that is wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That page 129 or 130 is what we normally read after Fajr. And we're not streaming it, but we read it after Asr. And we're trying a different platform today. Make dua, inshallah, that it works. الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب وأفضل ذكر فاعلم أنه لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا 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 الله 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 Allah, 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 la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, la ilaha illallah, Sayyiduna Muhammadur Rasulullah. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. وينفعنا بهم وإذا علينا من بركاتهم وأنوارهم ونفحاتهم وعلومهم في الدين والدنيا والآخرة. حضرة النبي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى الفاتحة. We're on page 133. Invocations after the Fajr prayer. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون وإلهكم إله واحد لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إني أقدم إليك بين يدي كل نفس ولمحة ولحظة وخطرة وطرفة يطرف بها أهل السماوات والأرض وكل شيء هو في علمك كائن أو قد كان أقدم إليك بين يدي ذلك كله. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. من الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء. وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كلنا آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها فما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. آمين. شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة أولو العلم قائما بالقسط لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم. وأنا أشهد بما شهد الله به وأشهد الله على ذلك واستودع الله هذه الشهادة وهي لي عند الله ودي أسأله حفظها حتى يتوفاني عليها. إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. قل اللهم مالك الملك اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. رحمن الدنيا والآخرة ورحيمهما تؤتي من تشاء منها وتمنع من تشاء. أنت ترحمنا فارحمنا رحمة تغنى بها له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are on page 145 now. We're up to the word of Sheikh Abu Bakr bin Salam, Sayyidina Sheikh Abu Bakr bin Salam, rahimahullahu ta'ala. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم يا عظيم السلطان، يا قديم الإحسان، يا دائم النعم، يا كثير الجود، يا واسع العطاء، يا خفي اللطف، يا جميل الصنع، يا حليم لا يعجل، صل يا ربي على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم ورضوان الصحابة أجمعين. اللهم لك الحمد شكرا ولك المن فضلا، وأنت ربنا حقا ونحن عبيدك رقا، وأنت لم تزل ذلك أهلا. يا ميسر كل عسير، ويا جابر كل كثير، صاحب كل فريد، ويا مغني كل فقير، ويا مقوي كل ضعيف، ويا مأمن كل مخيف، يسر علينا كل عسير فتيسير العسير عليك يسير. اللهم يا من لا يحتاج إلى البيان والتفسير، حاجاتنا كثير وأنت عالم بها وخبير. اللهم إني أخاف منك، وأخاف ممن يخاف منك، وأخاف ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق من يخاف منك نجنا ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم احرسنا بعينك التي لا تنام، واكنفنا بكنفك الذي لا يرام، وارحمنا بقدرتك علينا فلا نهلك، وأنت ذكرنا ورجاؤنا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، عدد خلقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماتي. اللهم إنا نسألك زيادة في الدين، وبركة في العمر، وصحة في الجسد، وسعة في الرزق، وتوبة قبل الموت، وشهادة عند الموت، وعفوا عند الموت، وموت الحساب، وأمانا من العذاب، ونصيبا من الجنة، وارزقنا النظر إلى وجهك الكريم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين، والحمد لله رب العالمين. عدد خلقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماتي. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، وسلام على المرسلين، والحمد لله رب العالمين. سيدنا الشيخ أبي بكر بن سلام، سيدنا حسين بن الشيخ بن سلام، وصلى الله عليه درجات في الجنة ويكفر وينفعنا بهم ويرضينا بركاتهم وأنوارهم ونفعاتهم الدنيا والآخرة. وإلى حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. الفاتحة. the word of the Latif of Al-Imam al-Haddad. We're on page 151. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي يحضرون ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي يحضرون ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي يحضرون أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون فتعالى الله الملك الحق لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم ومن يدعو مع الله إلها آخر لا برهان له به فإنما حسابه عند ربه إنه لا يفلح الكافرون وقل رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ويحيي الأرض بعد موتها وكذلك تخرجون أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم سلام على نوح في العالمين إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين إنهم من عبادنا المؤمنين أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم اللهم إني أصبحت منك بنعمة وعافية وستر فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك بالدنيا والآخرة اللهم إني أصبحت منك بنعمة وعافية وستر فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك بالدنيا والآخرة اللهم إني أصبحت منك بنعمة وعافية وستر فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك بالدنيا والآخرة اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك
أنك أنت الله
لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك عبدك ورسولك الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه يكافئ مزيدا الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه يكافئ مزيدا الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه يكافئ مزيدا آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى انفصام لها والله سميع عليم آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت
بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها
سميع عليم آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا رضيت بالله ربا دينا وبسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم
حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو
وعليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم
اللهم صل على
سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم
اللهم صل على
سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم إني أسألك من فجاعة الخير وأعوذ بك من فجاعة الشر اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت عليك توكلت وأنت رب العرش العظيم ما شاء الله كان ومن لم يشأ لم يكن ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما اللهم إني أعوذ بك من شر نفسي ومن شر كل دابة أنت آخذ بناصيتها إن ربي على صراط مستقيم يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك أستغيث ومن عذابك أستجير أصلح لي شأني كله ولا تكلني إلى نفسي ولا إلى أحد من خلقك طرفة عين اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن وأعوذ بك من العجز والكسل وأعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل وأعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال اللهم إني أسألك العافية في الدنيا والآخرة اللهم إني أسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في ديني ودنياي وأهلي ومالي اللهم استر رواتي وامن رواتي اللهم احفظني من بين يدي ومن خلفي وعن يميني وعن شمالي ومن فوقي وأعوذ بعظمتك أن أغتال من تحتي. اللهم أنت خلقتني وأنت تهديني وأنت تطعمني وأنت تسقيني وأنت تميتني وأنت تحييني وأنت على كل شيء قدير. أصبحنا على فطرة الإسلام وعلى كلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا مسلما وما كان من المشركين. اللهم بك أصبحنا وبك أمسينا وبك نحيا وبك نموت وعليك نتوكل وإليك النشور. أصبحنا وأصبح الملك لله والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذا اليوم، فتحه ونصره ونوره وبركته وهداه. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذا اليوم، خير ما قبله وخير ما بعده، وأعوذ بك من شر هذا اليوم وشر ما فيه وشر ما قبله وشر ما بعده. اللهم ما أصبح بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك، فلك الحمد ولك الشكر على ذلك. سبحان الله وبحمده
عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته.
وبحمده عدد خلقه
ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته.
سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه
ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته.
سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في السماء، سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في الأرض، سبحان الله عدد ما بين ذلك، سبحان الله عدد ما هو خالق. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في السماء، الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في الأرض، الحمد لله عدد ما بين ذلك، الحمد لله عدد ما هو خالق.
لا إله
إلا الله عدد ما خلق في السماء، لا إله إلا الله
عدد ما خلق في الأرض.
لا إله إلا الله عدد ما بين ذلك، لا إله إلا الله عدد ما هو خالق. الله أكبر، الله أكبر.
عدد ما خلق في الأرض. الله أكبر عدد ما بين ذلك. الله أكبر عدد ما هو خالق. لا
قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق في السماء، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم
عدد ما خلق في الأرض. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما بين ذلك. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد المفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بباب ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد المفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بباب ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد المفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، سلاما دائمين من باب ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة مرة.
كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. إلى حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. الفاتحة.
بسم الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك بسم الله. How is the video and sound quality to those that are online?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. فصل: يجب صوم رمضان بأحد أمور 5: أحدهما باستكمال شعبان 30 يوما، وثانيها برؤية الهلال في حق من رآه.
أحدهما, and it should be أحدها. Huma is a mistake in the first one. أحدها باستكمال شعبان 30 باستكمال شعبان 30 يوما ثانيها. Yeah, so that's a topographical error. It's in my print too, but it's an error. Yep.
وثانيها برؤية الهلال في حق من رآه وإن كان فاسقا، وثالثها بثبوته في حق من لم يره بعدل شهادة.
من لم يره ثبوته وفي حق من بعدل شهادة. Yep.
ورابعها بإخبار عدل رؤية موثوق به سواء وقع
بإخبار عدل رواية.
ورابعها بإخبار عدل رواية موثوق به سواء وقع في القلب صدقه أم لا، أو غير موثوق به إن وقع في القلب صدقه. وخامسها بظن دخول رمضان بالاجتهاد في من اشتبه عليه ذلك.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم وفيهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah. So we're continuing a lesson with some brothers that have been reading for some time in this lesson. I'll probably use a little more English for this than the one yesterday because of the nature of the material. Inshallah, if anyone wants to benefit, marhaban. La ilaha illallah. Shuruk's coming in soon too for those that want to pray. Those east of us probably already can pray. So this نوينا تعلم التعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفل والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والدعاء على الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقرب ثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. ونوينا ما نوى شيخنا وما علمه الله من صالح النيات. بسم الله. So please hit me with some black. Thank you. So we're continuing this lesson in Safinatul Najat, and after finishing zakah, and according to the Shara, that finishes the Safina as it originally, in its original form, as authored by Ibn Sumayr al-Hadrami. Nafa'ana bihi, very beneficial metin. Especially for those that are going to continue to seek knowledge through books in the later Shafi'i school. It will take you with its sharh to an easy understanding of Al-Muqaddim al-Hadramiyah and books after it. And that can make it easier to navigate the bigger books as you get there because they become very ocean-like And without a good solid basis, it's hard to navigate them. And this book gives you that, especially with this Sharh Nail al-Raja. And there is a scholar, Muhammad Nawawi Jawi. And in Southeast Asia, they name imams a lot. You'll meet Ramlis, you'll meet Hanafis. This is Nawawi. He's from Java. And he added these sections on fasting. And then there's some later prints. I'm not aware of a later sharh where they added sections on Hajj, but those are additions to the original text. And the print I'm aware of where they added Hajj, I wish they would have used other than Matan Abi Shuja', just because it's not, the school changed a lot since Abu Shuja' authored that. What the later scholars preferred in certain cases was different than the school as it was understood in that time and by that book. In any case, so these are additions that are from the author of Kashifatus Sajjad. That's another commentary on Safina that's beneficial, but it's not like Al-Muqarrar in our curriculum is Nail al-Raja. And I would use Kashifatus Sajjad for additional fawaid, additional benefits, but not as the relied upon curriculum book. So he begins fasting, and he says, Faslun yajibu sawmu Ramadana bi ahadi umurin khamsatin. Ramadan, it is obligatory to fast with one of five things, one of five things. So what is fasting? We've defined it before, I believe. And it is al-imsak lughatan wa shar'an, imsakin makhsus ala wajhin makhsus bi niyatin makhsusa. He just says here, imsak makhsus bi niyatin makhsus, but previously, imsak makhsus ala wajhin makhsus bi niyatin makhsusa. Refraining in a specific, from a specific abstinence in a specific way with a specific intention. Abstain from certain things like consuming anything and like intimate contact. And that is in a specific way, just from before dawn until after Maghrib, with a specific intention that be an obligatory fast in the case of a Ramadan fast. So this is, what this means is if the other conditions for the obligation of Ramadan are present, the Ramadan fast becomes obligatory with one of these things. You could also say, Yu'raf dukhul Ramadan. We know the entrance of the month of Ramadan by one of these things. So these are things by which we know the entrance of Ramadan. Allahu Akbar. So these are five, and the commentator adds 2, so that's 7. And there'll be some discussion about some that are mukhtalifi, like calculation or astronomy. Those are mukhtalif, those are difference of opinion. Imam Ramli gives some leeway there. And that's something of a standout position. Typically, that's not the case in the school and in the Sharia calculations. The Sharia generally doesn't give a lot of credence to calculations. La ilaha illallah. So the first of them is seeing the signs that indicate fubutuhu. When he says this, right? Ru'yat al-alamat ad-dala ala thubutihi fil bilad al-mu'tamada. Seeing the relied upon things, the relied upon signs that indicate that it has been authenticated. That's how I'm translating thubuti. So thubut here means that a Muslim magistrate in a place that's governed by al-Islam has accepted a testimony. And then it becomes binding upon the inhabitants there to essentially fast. And those of us that are in North America that embrace Islam or grew up here, we're used to the wild, wild west of fasting. And there's no hakim, right? There's no Islamic magistrate, nor are we in a place that's governed by al-Islam. But in a place where, in a Muslim land, in a place that was Dar al-Islam, that has a Muslim government, meaning Muslims are the governors, not unbelievers. There are certain things in the Sharia that are just simply lifted from the individuals, and those responsibilities do fall on the governing body, even if that governing body isn't pious, right? And as hard as that might be for some of us to grasp, and as difficult that might be on some of our nufus, the Prophet ﷺ ordered us to obey the magistrate unless he made explicit kufr, as long as he was establishing the prayers, right? And I know well the political Islamic movement ideologies, and those infected our African American communities a lot, Ikhwani ideology and Jamaat Islami ideology, and we kind of naturally gravitated to that because we were coming out of the civil rights movement, and we had the Panthers and what have you. And they would almost want us to believe that, all of the rulers of those countries are just unbelievers. I mean, the Islamic movement ideologies, they want us to believe that those rulers are unbelievers, and, you just fight them and they're oppressive and, do whatever. But that's not the way Sunni Muslims viewed law and ahkam sultaniya, though, and we're not going to go off into all of that. It's totally a digression, but that's what it means, though, thubut, right? That's what thubut means. So someone in that land who sees one of the signs or hears. So those signs were things like hanging candles or lamps on the minbar, on the minarets, right? So they would hang up lamps. These are Ramadan lamps every year when Ramadan's known by the Qadi. This is before mass communication. They would hang these lamps or shoot cannons, things like that. There are various signs that they had. And they would also shoot it for Maghrib, so people could break their fast. The second is being informed by a number of tawatur, even unbelievers, that the hilal has been sighted, or that it has been, and actually rather than say authenticated, you could say confirmed. Thubutuhu is confirmed in a place that has the same rising point as yours. La ilaha illallah. So what does that mean? That means that, what is adad tawatur? So adad tawatur is a large number that witness something physically perceivable, and too much, too many to fabricate. So if there's a large number, even of unbelievers, it's seen in Canada, it's seen in the United States, it's seen in Mexico by groups of people in each place, and you're told that, and that reaches you from a sound source, right? You're informed by that number in a way that's sound. Then that number indicates that the moon has been seen, right? It's not possible for all of those people to have come together and fabricated. Yes.
So I've had this question actually for a while about the nature of tawatur, and I was wondering if the Shafi'i Imams have a number that they consider to be.
No. Yeah. No. It differs. Yeah. There's not a specific number. You might do Murasal al-Taysir in the books of Hadith. Did they ever throw out specific numbers? But usually those things, and that's a good question. a lot of times the language of our theologians, for those of us that grew up in the West, we always want more quantifiable definitions, and they simply don't speak in that same language. Like a lot of things are like people want to know what are the inch diameter of a spot of blood on your clothing that is considered large or small. How do I know? And they say it goes back to urf, right? It goes back. It's subjective to a degree. Tawatur is probably not going to be subjective, but it's I don't memorize any specific number from the Shafi'i books. I'd be interested if in the books of hadith they narrowed it down, but I would venture to say that there's not a lot of narrowing, and I'd be very surprised if there was a mu'tamid of it, because those things usually go back to kind of the curves are a little more rounded than a mathematical, geometrical type of thought. Yeah, adad tawatur. Yeah, and urf means common acknowledgement, right? So if you were to tell a group of people of intellect that this is adad tawatur, they would accept it. La ilaha illallah. So even unbelievers, that it's been seen or confirmed. And all of this is, or anytime we say confirmed, that's in the context of a Muslim governing in a land that is Dar al-Islam, right? And again, a detail like Dar al-Islam does not mean that everybody's pious, or that everyone's a Muslim, or acts like a Muslim should. In the Medina of the Prophet ﷺ, there were munafiqun who were known, right? There were people who were munafiq who were known, right? So the kind of utopian idea that the Islamic movements would want to purport, and a lot of badness comes from that. Killing Muslims comes from those ideas, because they'll make a blanket takfir of Muslim governments and people who obey them. And that's what opened the door for the kind of maniac jihadists that blow themselves up in masajid. They believe they're fighting kuffar, right? And again, this is a digression, but these ideologies were heavily propagated here, and they had a very adverse effect in indigenous communities, and I think they had an adverse effect in the youth that grew up here. And it's mukhalafa. It is not Ahl Sunnah, a mainstream Ahl Sunnah understanding. And even if we could say you can get an understanding that agrees with, for example, in certain circumstances and conditions, opposing a corrupt ruler from Sunni scholars, and you can. Sheikh Newell quotes one of those in Reliance. Those groups deviated in other ways too. Essentially, they're Salafist in creed. They followed the Wahhabi Saudis in creed, which brings in anthropomorphism and comparing Allah's attributes to the attributes of creatures. So there's a lot of problems there. Allahu Akbar. And it didn't work. Another thing. It's a digression, but like, you failed, Yani. Where's your state? You've been working on it for 50 years. So like, even if I was going to try to build an Islamic state, and I'm not saying that's what my program is, it's an obligation that there be an imam, but the program I'm on is different than that. It's educating the Muslims. But even if that were my program, I wouldn't follow you. You know what I mean? And as an African American, Yani, you know what I mean? The Dawah program here in the States and the way those movements have worked, like, there's a billboard about Kashmir going right through the middle of Detroit, the oppression in Kashmir. Like one of the poorest zip codes in the country. I hear gunshots all around this area, and the best thing you could do is spend money on a billboard about Kashmir. Yani. Like, just like pragmatically speaking, I wouldn't ever participate in that stuff. Aside from the bid'ah, the departing from Ahl Sunnah Islam. Allahu Akbar. And again, that's totally a digression, inshallah ta'ala. La ilaha illallah. So then, so those are 6 and 7. There's an 8th too, and this is Imam Ramli's position, as was his father. The son is Muhammad and the father is Ahmad. Imam Ramli, he's the author of An-Nihaya, which is a relied upon book for fatwa in some of the Shafi'i lands. The Egyptians used to follow Ramli's position, and also Indonesia. That is obligatory for someone who knows the hilal based on calculation or astronomy, and also someone who has the conviction of the honesty of the person who has informed them of his calculation and his astronomy. Ibn Hajar opposed him. He said they're not obliged, they're allowed to fast, but it doesn't fulfill them. It doesn't count as a Ramadan fast for them. Naam. La ilaha illallah. So those are 8 that he introduced. And then, so the first of these 5 that are just in the Metan, Ahaduha, by Sha'ban being completed as 30 days. And that's 30 days since the sighting at the end of Rajab. 30 days of Sha'ban, that is 1, right? Even to the extent that someone who saw the Sha'ban hilal, the new moon of Sha'ban, and it wasn't confirmed by his local magistrate, and he counts 30 days, then he's obliged to fast, even if everybody else isn't fasting with him, because they didn't see that hilal and it wasn't confirmed. Second, by seeing the hilal for the one who saw it, even if he's corrupt, right? So someone sees the hilal, this person is a drunk, for example, and no one believes him. Miskeen, right? He's fasik. No one will believe him. He's still obliged to fast himself. Right? He's still obliged to fast himself. And he mentions the hilal is on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd days. And then after that, it's called qamar, right? So for 3 days, it's a hilal. The 3rd, بِثُبُوتِهِ فِي حَقٍّ مَنْ لَمْ يَرَهُ بِعَدْلِ شَهَادَةٍ. Okay, if it is confirmed, the person who didn't see it, if it is confirmed with Adl Shahada, an upright person, a person whose testimony is upright, that's called, who's upright for testimony, say Adlu Shahada, meaning that we'll accept his witnessing. If an upright witness, you could say Adlu Shahada, they testify, 1, that's our school, and many things they have to have 2 upright witnesses, but in the hilal, 1 is enough. If 1 upright witness testifies and it is confirmed, that's meaning confirmed, the qadi accepts his testimony, then everybody has to fast, right? Everybody under that governance. And also, I forgot to do commentary on one other thing. In the beginning, he said, if there's tawatur, that it's seen in a place that agrees to your rising point, right? So the rising point, matla, or you could say rising time, is that like Maghrib and Fajr and the rising of certain constellations is the same in those 2 places. So that there's a broader expanse, north-south, than there is east-west. You know, if you go just a little ways east, it's going to be a much earlier Maghrib and Fajr, or west. So places that have the same rising time, those places if the cited in one, then and they're both governed by the same magistrate, it'll be binding upon that citing will be binding upon others. But that's with those two conditions: the same rising point and the same magistrate. And that's how Shafi'is understand local citing. So like when we're arguing at the beginning of Ramadan about sightings in South America or California or things like that, none of that is on the Mu'tamad of the Shafi'i school, right? And that is one of the two positions in the school. The weaker position is that that even a place that doesn't have the same rising point time, that they would fast with the other place if it's confirmed. So those are two positions in the school. And other imams have positions that are different. So Adlu Shahada. So what is this Adlu Shahada? This is an important definition that they introduce here. And this definition carries, actually, it's most important probably in the last quarter of a fiqh book, right? In the last quarter of a fiqh book is where it becomes really important. You're talking about testimonies, crimes, things like that. How are they established? And then also in marriage, it's important because those are the witnesses for a wedding. So Adlu Shahada. Adlu Shahada is man lam yartakib kabira wa lam yassirra ala saghira wa ghalabat ta'atuhu ma'asiyahu. It's someone who didn't commit a major sin or persist in a minor sin, and his obedience outweighs his disobedience, right? So someone who we know commits openly major sins, that person is not adl. They're not regarded as upright. That person is fasiq. They're regarded as corrupt. And also someone who the majority of their masiyah is more than their ta'ah, right? Yes, sir.
So it's not somebody who, like if I see a person commit one major sin
in front of you makes them fasiq until they make tawbah.
So would like even like a lie or backbiting?
Backbiting is not a kabira. Lying is, but there are exceptions to lying. But a lie is without excuse is a kabira. The kabair, though, even themselves, they differ about them. And there's a book of enormities in Reliance of the Traveler that's from Ibn Hajar, but they differ dramatically about what are the major sins, and they differ about their definition. But Imam Al-Ghazali, he said in his time, al-fisq amma al-bilad wal-ibad, that corruption is general among the people and among the lands. And there's some other details there in the sharh that you could read. In Adl Riwayah, there are different shuruts. So you have Adl Shahada and Adl Riwayah, and I'll leave you to the sharh to observe those. So those are the shurut, they are different. So if this is confirmed by he says a judge, right? And that's practically speaking. It could be confirmed by the imam as well. But practically speaking, the judges are the ones accepting those testimonies. Be riwayati adli shahada, by an upright witness that the hilal was seen after Maghrib, and the person has good eyesight, right? They can see well. He accepts that and confirms it, then it becomes obligatory for everyone to fast based on the thubut, based on the confirmation with the Islamic magistrate. And there's a point here. There's a khilaf though the mu'tamad, if we say Ibn Hajar's position is a mu'tamad, that if someone testifies that they can see the hilal when it's impossible, that their testimony can be rejected. And that impossibility could be based on astronomers' calculation, but with not just any calculation that's qat'i, that's unequivocal, and that there's a number of tawatur that says that it's impossible. Yes, sir.
So you're saying it's. I guess I missed the detail. Like, could you explain it? Okay.
Sure. So if a number of astronomers or calculators, people know how to calculate the heavenly bodies, testify, or if they say with unequivocal evidence, calculations that are based on things that are qat'i, not dhanni, and they're an adad of tawatur, that it's impossible to see the moon tonight. And someone says, I saw the moon. In Ibn Hajar's view, his testimony can be rejected, can be not accepted, and then the sighting's not confirmed.
Astronomers have to be known to be upright?
No, it's not because it's not based on, it's not subjective. It's based on their calculations and their, the things they're calculating. And I don't know astronomy, but that's what the fuqaha say. That things that are qat'i and they're added tawatur. Yeah.
It means both.
Yeah. If you review in Bushra Kareem, I believe he'll bring that position of Ibn Hajar. If not, it's in, maybe you'll find it in Fath Mu'in. It's certainly in Tuhfa, he mentions it.
So, in our modern context, like who would be the one who would determine that?
Determine which?
Determine that, that there's enough evidence to, I guess, like here in the West, that there's enough evidence from astronomers to make a strong enough argument that it's impossible to sight the moon.
Who would determine it in a way that was binding on others?
Or
for themselves?
For themselves, and for I guess, for example, for me, who would I go to say, this is what I've seen from astronomers. Can we accept?
I would say, so first of all, that's mukhtalafi. Second of all, you're not in a situation where you're not bound by anyone's confirmation of sighting in this context, because there's no government. And we haven't formed like Jama'at where we say it's functioning like Ahlul Hil wal Aqd, and we're bound by that. And honestly, if someone was functioning like that, people just go down the street and do their own thing, right? Like our Sheikh said some years ago, if the Mahdi came out right now, you'd have a revolution against him. He said it during the Arab Spring, right? So, I mean, really what's happening is you are going to fast based on what you believe. So you're going to find that's how people are fasting in this context, right? What do you, who's, because it's going to come. Even someone who's corrupt, you're going to fast based on believing that someone is honest, right? You're going to fast based on believing someone is honest. Yeah, that's as much as I could say. Without, if we wanted to get a body together and do the research, what exactly is a qat'i? What is an unequivocal point that astronomers use? And have enough of them concluded based on those unequivocal points, if we've understood what those are, and that a sighting is possible or not. If we wanted to get a body together to research that, who would be bound by that? People who that research reached, who believed it, who wanted to follow the position that you can take that calculation as a rejection of sightings.
Okay.
And That someone else could say, well, Imam Ramli says no. Khalas. I'm taking that position. And in the absence of a hakim, no one can force anyone else. That's the thing. You have these umbrella organizations that want to take over the world and tell everybody, I'm going out to Hawaii and you all have to fast. Like anyone who reads a little bit of fiqh, forget you, man. I don't have to do that. Right? I'll just follow the mu'tamid. I'm uncomfortable. I know brothers on the East Coast. I'm not comfortable with your monkey business. I'm gonna follow the mu'tamid of Shafi'i. Your rising point and sighting point, rising points and times are not the same as mine. So khalas, I'm not fasting with you. And no one can force him to do otherwise. We don't have a hakim. No. So really what you're gonna do is you're gonna research or find someone who you trust and believe and fast based on that. And another thing is, what is the validity of worship based on? The validity of worship is based on dhann al-mukallaf wa ma fi nafs al-amr, right? That you're confident, the confidence of the accountable person, that's the basis for the soundness of worship. So what does that mean? If I had blood on this and I washed it until I was confident and I pray and there's a spot I missed and I never knew that and I died and I leave this world, that salah is valid according to the Sharia, and I've done what is upon me. And the same for fasting, the same for other things, So that's the best I could say, Yani. The dhan you have based on who you believe is what you're going to fast. Yeah, what you're going to fast. Yeah. And anybody who's trying to force everybody to their position in the absence of a magistrate, he's fighting a losing battle. And he believes he's going to unify the ummah, and he's actually going to cause more disunity, right? And to a degree, it goes back to the question I was saying about you, like understanding how the Sharia functions based on like other thought patterns. It's okay for things to be based on dhan. Most of the Sharia is based on dhan. Most of the Sharia, there's a lot of room for subjective decisions, and we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as we've been ordered. Khalas. We leave this world and alhamdulillah. And mistakes will be made sometimes, Mistakes were made. Imagine how many mistakes were made, when there weren't some of the modern techniques that we have to determine things. It's cloudy, the moon is actually there. We didn't know, so we didn't fast. We waited, as the Prophet said. It was there. We just couldn't see it. And we're responsible with what we witness, La ilaha illallah. It's going along. Alhamdulillah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. All right. So, la ilaha illallah. So, thubutu. Third. Rabiuha bi ikhbari adli riwayatin mawthuqan bihi. Being informed by adl riwayah, which isn't quite as rigorous as Adlu Shahada. And I'll leave you to the sharh for that, the difference. Who's trusted, mawthuqan bihi. If that occurred, if their honesty occurred to the heart, or the heart was convinced of their honesty or not, or someone who wasn't trusted, right? Their trustworthiness wasn't known, but you believe them. And that's where probably most of our fasts are. Walaikum salam. Or even less than that, actually. Most of our fasting is even less than that level of confidence. Because I doubt a lot of that we're able to establish that a lot of the people who are testifying are adl riwayah, right? We're not able to establish their adala. So we're going to go down to another level. So what is meant by trustworthiness? We haven't previously witnessed them being dishonest. Their dishonesty isn't known, so they're assumed to be trustworthy, right? As opposed to someone who we've known that they're being dishonest, then khalas, they're not mawthuq bihi. La ilaha illallah. Or someone who we know their dishonesty, we've known them to be dishonest in the past, but we believe them in this sighting, even a child or a fasiq, right? So, and that's the level, right? We don't know who saw it. We don't know anything about them, of their adala or anything, but we believe them, right? In that case, those who believe them are obliged to fast. Someone who didn't believe them wouldn't be obliged to fast, right? La ilaha illallah. And then the fifth is confidence that Ramadan had entered by ijtihad, for someone who's unable to tell the beginning of Ramadan. So that scenario is like someone who's imprisoned where they can't witness the sky. So they do ijtihad, for example, like making chalk marks on the wall and counting off the days and trying to calculate the months based on ijtihad, based on counting. And Allah knows best. And all of this is the discussion of how this is determined in the Shafi'i school. Some of it we mentioned relied upon position, but really we're acting on generally on other than the relied upon position of the Shafi'i school. And that is that when the moon is witnessed, at distance even, that you can fast. That's where most people are acting right now. Very, very few people are actually, I know people in Atlanta that do this though. They've determined according to their ijtihad what their matla is, what their rising and setting point is, and they go only based on sightings within that sphere. And that's azim that there's an example like that. And they have something of an organized shura as well. Allah bless them. But most of the rest of us are not fasting on the relied upon position in the Shafi'i school. And personally, I would say I don't think we should, because the other position is quite strong. And it makes it easier for families. If families are fasting together, if they're doing Eid together, or communities are fasting together, they're doing Eids together, it's easier. And we don't have thubut because we don't have a hakim. Right. So that's not what's happening. We're not bound by the hakim of other lands, like by Saudi, for example. We're not bound by that hukum. We're not under his jurisdiction. We live outside of that jurisdiction. So that's not binding upon us. Really, we're not aware of adala here, right? We're not aware of adala. I don't even believe that most of the witnesses are what we call mistur al-adl. So what we're being informed of is someone who we don't have, adala. Maybe we don't know if maybe they're mawthuq bihi, but we believe them, right? So people look at the sightings, and I believe that sighting, or an imam in a community looks into the sightings, he believes it. So he says, I'm going to fast based on this. And then his community might follow him based on their believing what he's informed them of. He's received it from people who he's believed. That's basically how we're fasting. And if we understand that, then what's the point of trying to force everybody to do what we're doing? Right? There's no thubut. There's not a qadi, right? None of us are the qadi. None of the organizations that exist here, the umbrella organizations in the United States, is the qadi. If they were, this acronym couldn't argue with that acronym over who's in charge. But we know they do, right? I'm the umbrella, I'm for the Arabs, I'm for the Desis. That's not a hakim, yani. You're in the same town. This one governs the Arabs, this one governs the Desis. If you had a hakim, no, there's one ruler who governs everyone, and his decisions are binding, and it lifts khilaf. But in the absence of that, there's a lot of room for people to take the difference of opinions that suit them. That's not to say a group of Muslims in a city that is able to organize themselves and conduct some affairs among decision makers in that group. That'd be great if we had that, but you don't see many examples of that. Yes, sir.
Sheikh, could you define mawthuqin bihi for me again?
Man lam yu'had kadhibu. Someone who we don't know they're lying.
And then, so I didn't understand the wording here. It says, سواء وقع في القلب صدقه أم لا.
That is riwayat adal, right? So if someone who's adal riwayat, excuse me, that's someone who is upright, informs you of the testimony, even if you don't believe them, but you do know their uprightness. So that's accepting testimony. You can't do takdhib of an adl in the Sharia.
Okay.
Someone who's upright, who testifies without other qara'in, So, and our hadith is based on that, right? That's what hadith is based on. Anyone who transmits hadith, if the hadith is sahih or hasan, that person is adl riwayah. They're upright for transmission. So that means what? We're bound by their testimony to the extent that, affairs of Sharia, affairs of worship will be governed by that person's testimony. Yeah. And ghayr mawthuq is someone who's not upright. We've known them to be dishonest. But if we believe that their testimony of the moon, we're obliged to act on that. But if they're not, if we don't believe it, we're not obliged to act on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I had one more question. So the mu'tamad of the school is that you can follow another place that's governed by the same magistrate that shares the same rising point.
Same matla, and that's how I'm translating rising point.
Okay.
Yeah. You could also say time,
Okay.
because that wazn is a makan and zaman, right?
So then, what would be the?
And probably rising time is more accurate. So there's a call of ikhtilaf or ittihad al-matala. Or as in Minhaj, they say a balad qareeb or a balad ba'id, something that's close or something that's far.
Okay.
Our books don't say anything that I would translate as local, unless you say maybe close could be translated as local, but the words that are used are near and far and matla, rising point, ikhtilaf al-matala, ittihad al-matala.
Okay.
That's the vocabulary that's used. So the mu'tamad is, say we're here in Detroit and we see it. Somewhere that's close, that's governed by the same body, is bound by our sighting.
Okay.
And somewhere that's far or not governed by the same body, even if it's close, is not bound by that sighting. So you had sultanates that were neighboring in the Muslim world, like prior to the nation state era, right? Where a sultan has his small governance. The sighting of one didn't bind the other. Yeah.
And then what would be the ghayr mu'tamad?
And you could say al-muqabil here, the position that's contrasted to that. And that is that if it's seen in a land, those in a distant land are obliged. And distance is anywhere beyond the place that has the geographical area that has the same matla. The geographical area that has the same matla is considered qareeb. What's beyond that is considered ba'id. And that muqabil is strong. It's a strong position in the school that is permissible to act upon for your personal practice. And that's what I act on usually. Unless I feel like it's monkey business, and I'll just fall back on the mu'tamad and not fast or not break for Eid, for example, or for the beginning of Ramadan. Yeah. So there's like a funny business sighting somebody has way out on the West Coast or South America or something. You're not bound by that on the mu'tamad.
And then I'm sorry, I have one more What about the details about like assisted sighting or?
Oh, that's a good question. In our school, it has to be seen with the naked eye. That's what sighting means. Even someone with glasses, I'd have to be able to see it with my glasses off to testify. They can find it with assistance. You could use binoculars, find it, take them away, you can still see it. It's naked eye sighting. Please let Fatiha seeking from Allah sincere, accept the works, beneficial knowledge, good teaching, calling, the guidance. To Allah be pleased with us, please the heart of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the reward of the Fatiha that we recite, go to our parents, our teachers, our sheikhs, anyone we owe rights in the presence of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Fatiha. Place everyone in Allah's care.